Hey everyone, Fred here, and today we'll be discussing the newest reworks in Tacticus, featuring boss Gulgortz, the war boss in Mega Armor, and Snappa Wrecka, the Killer Can. This video will be a deep dive into both of those refreshed characters. If you're into deeper analysis and aren't scared of longer video formats, you're in a good place now. Before we start though, I'm doing a special thing in this video. You see, your favorite Magos has got you a giveaway for the occasion of this huge orc rebalance. We'll be having a boss Gulgortz giveaway. The winner will receive 250 shards, while 5 more people will get 100 shards each. To take part in the giveaway, subscribe to my channel, leave a like under this video, comment what you like about the orcs the most, and I will pick the winners randomly. I will contact you in the comments section if you win and will shout out your win in the next video, planned for release in October. And for everyone involved, I also got you a special code for the occasion, Deepest Dive, which will grant you 10 Snappa Wrecka shards and some bonus Blackstone. And in addition to that, I reached out to Snowprint and asked their main designer some questions about the design process of both of those reworks. This video will be packed with content. Let's not waste any more time now. So, let's do Gulgortz first, since he was first announced and Snappa was basically a bonus surprise for us all. First things first, the most basic thing that we can take a look at are the main character stats. Well, health. As you can see, it did not change, but he was healthy already, so that's not bad at all. Armor. It went from 1438 to 2490, which is a 73% buff. To put it into perspective, previously, a legendary 2 Screamer Killer was capable of hurting Gulgortz with his AoE swing called Unparalleled Ferocity, since the damage on the skill was able to outgrow his armor. Now, Gulgortz will get damaged by this skill only when fighting a legendary 5 Screamer Killer, and even then, he will get 500 damage per hit, which would result in 215 damage in total, which means that Gulgortz can survive on his own in melee for 4 turns against a legendary 5 Screamer Killer now. But not only can he survive, he can do damage now too. While not on the levels of damage like Exitor Raw or Neuroshop, Gulgortz surely packs a punch now. First, we have to say 3 things about his damage changes. Gulgortz lost 3 out of his 5 hits on the melee attack, meaning that base hit number on his melee right now is 2 hits. This is not bad at all though, but I will explain it later in the video. The second damage related change is to his pierce ratio, which changed from chain to eviscerating, so the ratio jumped from 20% to 50%. This means that his damage will be way more consistent now and he'll be able to properly damage even armored enemies. The third damage related change is the damage number itself, which got buffed significantly. It changed from 1150 to 2490, which is a 116% buff to the number. Now, to understand how this affects Gulgortz and his reliability, we need to take a look at maximum and minimal damage potential of the character before and after the change. Before, Gulgortz had 5 hits in melee, all hitting for 1150 and had a 20% pierce ratio. This means that against armored enemies, Gulgortz used to do 1150 damage at maximum, while at his best, for example against unarmored Grotz, he was able to do 5750 damage per attack. The new Gulgortz has 2 hits in melee at 2490 damage each, with a pierce ratio of 50%. This means that against heavily armored enemies, he will deal 2490 damage at the very least, while against unarmored enemies, he will deal 4980 damage. But wait, there is more. You see, there is more to Gulgortz changes and his damage output. Now, we have to get to the traits section of the rework. We have 2 traits that heavily increase his damage potential. The first one is the obvious one. Since the very first rework, all orcs have been slowly getting buffed with Get Stuck In trait, which basically gives you bonus hits if you surround the enemy. Gulgortz lost his DAKKA trait in the process, but it is well worth it, trust me. The Orc trait now gives Gulgortz an effect where his attacks will deal +1 hit for every 2 hits done if the enemy is surrounded enough. If you surround him with 2 or more Orc units, meaning that you need 1 more Orc other than Gulgortz to enable it, The trait works at its full potential faster, but you can also surround them with other units like Bloodletters or Scarabs to enable the trait. If you enable this, Get Stuck In gives Gulgortz +1 hit on his attack, so 2490 more damage, resulting in 7470 damage per swing against unarmored enemies and 3735 damage per swing against heavily armored enemies. But wait, there still is more. You see, Gulgortz didn't just receive Get Stuck In as his trait, no, he got more. Our boy got Crushing Strikes as his trait, which means that his normal melee attacks will do 50% more damage if he doesn't move in a turn. What this means is that without Get Stuck In, Gulgortz will start doing 7470 damage against unarmored enemies and 3735 damage against armored enemies per turn. With Get Stuck In enabled, this results in 11,205 damage against unarmored enemies and 5,603 damage against armored enemies per turn. We will get back to the damage numbers soon. First, we need to cover his new abilities. Now, the next thing that changed with Gulgortz is his passive, but it didn't change by much. The damage and the pierce is the same. Two small changes are made though. First of all, the ability will work whether Gulgortz attacks in melee or in ranged combat, meaning that you can always count on your reliable Grot Gunner to add some damage. The second change is that the same Grot Gunner on passive will now work with Get Stuck In if it's enabled, resulting in 4 hits instead of 3. So, in a way we can say that Gulgortz's passive's damage output has been increased by 33%. It's also listed as a ranged ability now, meaning that it will now get properly buffed by all ranged buffs, like Dark Strider for example. Lastly, the change to his active ability. Oh boy. This will cause lots of discussion on Reddit and Discord. So, before the rework, Gulgortz active used to force him and all your units located 3 hexes from Gulgortz to charge forward into melee with +1 movement and dealing 797 damage on their melee attack as a bonus. You had no control of the units, but could somehow predict how they would place since they followed some basic rules. Well, that's not really the case anymore. The active ability has been properly updated and enriched with some bonus effects in order to make it playable. First things first, Gulgortz cannot move in his turn before using this ability, must stand still, just like Ragnar. Then, the ability now affects all orc units on the map, and then other characters next to Gulgortz when he uses it, so the range on the effect gets both buffed and nerfed, depending on how you look at it. Then, it still gives +1 movement and bonus damage to all units affected, so all orcs and the characters next to Gulgortz. So that thing is unchanged. You can expect a massive burst of melee damage when this thing gets enabled. Then, the +1 hit on melee attack works not only for the orcs this time, it also works for adjacent units too. So in theory, Gulgortz has some sort of place in low hit melee teams, including things like Godswill or Mataneo right now. Then, you don't lose control of anyone other than Gulgortz. Only he charges in, but you get to pick his target, so you can predict and control his positioning properly. Everyone else affected by the bonus damage, bonus movement range and the bonus hit count can move like always, so you can fully utilize the damage potential here. And then, the ability gets a summoning factor in it. It now summons 2 orc boys adjacent to Gulgortz as the first action in the ability, and then, after giving all debuffs, makes all orc boys take a free turn. What this means is that it spawns 2 boys, it buffs their damage in melee, gives them +1 hit in melee, gives them +1 movement, and then makes them go ham. The thing is, the orc boys can do 3 things depending on what will do the most damage to the enemy. First of all, they can charge into melee, dealing up to 10,767 damage in melee against unarmored enemies, reduced to 108 damage against heavily armored enemies, or they can shoot from range, doing up to 5,584 damage, reduced to 838 damage against armored enemies, or they can use their active ability the Stick Bomb and just blow things up. Keep in mind that this ability can also hurt your own units, so if you have any fragile units next to the enemy, they can get damaged or even killed. As you can see, The variety in the possible outcomes can be big, and it is your job as the orc player to control this chaos and predict what will happen next. One thing that should be mentioned is if you were to reset Gulgortz's active ability by using Onshi and the first two orc boys were still alive, then the ability would basically buff Gulgortz, other orc characters adjacent to Gulgortz, and then buff 4 orc boys and give them a bonus turn. So if you want plenty of Choppa and plenty of DAKKA, that's the way to go. Keep in mind that you won't be able to use it twice in the same turn like Ragnar, since Gulgortz cannot move before using it and the first usage will force Gulgortz to charge in, but he will work great in Tournament Arena with his active now, since it basically gives Ragnar-oriented teams yet another tool. So that's the new Gulgortz for you. Plenty of stat buffs, plenty of new potential to explore, plenty of synergies. In order for us to appreciate the changes, I'd like to showcase some synergies that could be considered if you wanted to try out the new and improved Gulgortz. In the overview of the synergies, we'll be looking at what characters can make the new Gulgortz shine even more in his bright yellow armor. Well, to make Gulgortz shine, we need to find ways to buff his get stuck in trait and to buff our boys as well as we can. The first character that comes to mind is Ancient Toriad. He is a melee-centric character that will buff Gulgortz, his boys, and Snotfloga's Grotz that will most likely be using to quickly enable get stuck in. Toriad allows Gulgortz to get 4 base hits on his WAAAGH turn, which results in 6 hits with get stuck in enabled. All of his boys will then get 4 hits in melee, which is 2 base plus 1 from the WAAAGH plus 1 from the Toriad, and then the next turn Gulgortz will have 3 plus 1 hits in melee and the boys will have 2 plus 1 hits in melee. The second character that works with hit numbers is Vitruvius. He isn't that synergistic with all the other orcs, but he can apply the buff from a safe range and he can also repair Gulgortz, which will help him with tanking the tough raid bosses. Vitruvius also will allow you to spin your team more into ranged, low-hit characters like Shosil, and less into Grotz if you have a way to get 2 orcs or 4 units next to the main target. Keep in mind that you can use Gulgortz with both Toriad and Vitruvius, which would make Gulgortz a death machine, getting 5 plus 2 hits on his WAAAGH turn and 4 plus 2 hits in his every turn. And that's a lot of damage. The third character that comes to mind is Onshi, which will allow you to reuse the WAAAGH in theory. This should be useful against mobile bosses, since Gulgortz can't be in melee against his target in order to enable WAAAGH. So, if the raid boss runs away from you, you just enable Gulgortz and his active with Onshi, spawn in another 2 boys and have yet another buffed turn for the melee combat. Other synergies are pretty minor and pretty universal to other characters, so I won't include them to not drag this video into an hour-long essay. Overall, Gulgortz looks like a fun and reliable character now. Now, to quickly add in some things that are of lesser importance but may be important to some of you. 1. Gulgortz receiving eviscerating damage type and crushing strikes may prove useful in future legendary release events. 2. Gulgortz now works with 1 hit requirement for legendary release events, since his ranged attack is only 1 hit. This means that he will be able to one-shot a Scarab Swarm with his melee attack even without Get Stuck In enabled, since he will be getting 2 hits from the main attack and 3 hits from his passive. 3. The Orc campaign got a lot easier thanks to those changes. Now, let's jump into the Snowprint Q&A section for Gulgortz. I reached out to the team and asked a few questions about this rework, so I will read them out to you, and then I will read what answers I got from the main designer at Snowprint. Number 1. What were the main design goals for Gulgortz and his rework? The answer is: we wanted him to feel representative of a big orc in mega armor. His defenses were quite low and his attack was not threatening due to a low damage stat and low pierce ratio, which was not a good feeling and did not benefit a huge Choppa. At the same time, the old WAAAGH was flavorful, but not really intuitive or effective. We also considered that orcs are all about rallying a horde of boys and then charging their enemies, but the original Tacticus orcs did not support that playstyle enough. WAAAGH as probably the most iconic orc ability, was a perfect fit to add some summons and capture that team, while making it an attractive ability in the process. Question number 2. Why is he 2 hits in melee instead of an uneven number to push his active synergy more? Is it deliberately designed to be a supportive, like damage buff, movement buff, hit buff and summon skill, instead of pushing him to do the big damage, since 5-hit Gulgortz benefited from the bonus damage more? The answer is WAAAGH should be the iconic worklight that rallies our orcs, or wannabe orcs, and pushes them into battle, so it's deliberately designed to be more of a supportive ability instead of benefiting boss Gulgortz significantly more than other units. We gave his normal melee attacks 2 hits because we wanted to be effective outside of the WAAAGH turns and with higher damage. Eviscerating damage type and crushing strike, adding even more hits, would have been too powerful paired with the other benefits his kit offers. Question number 3. Was 1 hit on his range attack, resulting in it being absolutely awful of an attack by itself, a deliberate choice to push him into 1-hit teams in legendary release events? The answer. Units in Tacticus have only 1 damage stat, so melee and ranged combat is linked. With more damage, a multi-hit range attack would be too powerful and distract from Gulgortz's melee focus. Instead, we opted to trigger the passive also on range attack to keep the DAKKA flavor fully flowing without upsetting the balancing. Eligibility for legendary events did not play a part in this. Question number 4. Why Orc boyz instead of Storm boyz? Flavor, because Warboss has his boys, or gameplay consistency for the players, since Storm boyz could explode and feel like a waste? The answer is yes to both in this case. The Orc boyz are the most common and iconic orc unit, and the Storm boyz with their chance to self-destruct don't feel good for an ability that players invest resources in. Question number 5. Was there a moment when you were considering changing his equipable items? For example, changing him to a crit item plus HP armor item like Katskoden? The answer is no, because there are technical difficulties with that sort of change for units that already have different items equipped by the players, and in this case there was no strong argument for it to suit the character identity. Question number 6. Any chance for orc units and summons from orc characters to also get stuck in as their trait? While it wouldn't be online most of the time, it could feel very rewarding to enable it with certain synergies. The answer is we are not planning to add it to Grots. We might consider adding it to Orc boyz or Storm boyz, but they are commonly used as enemies in various game modes, so the balancing has to be carefully considered. For this reason, the answer is not now, but maybe in the future. And that's it for the Gulgortz part of the video. Now, let's dive into Snappa Wrecka, the best DAKKA machine in the game right now. The format of the breakdown will be the same. Stats, skills, synergies, minor gameplay information, and developer Q&A. Keep in mind that while Gulgortz was a massive overhaul of the character, Snappa is basically a modernization and buffing of the character concept that we already had. He is tons of fun now though. So, for Snappa's stats, they got tweaked properly, but they aren't as revolutionary as Gulgortz. First things first, his health got buffed from 7667 to 8626, which is a 12.5% buff. This will also mean that his death will do 12.5 more damage, since it scales off his max health. Then, his armor got upgraded from 1438 to 1917, which is a 33% buff, raising his tankiness considerably, especially against lower pierce enemies. Lastly, his damage got changed from 1917 to 2207, which is a 50% buff. Very nice. Now, core part of the damage calculation in Tacticus is pierce and hit number. While his damage types and thus the pierce ratios did not change, he gained 1 hit on his melee attack, meaning that the baseline damage output for Snappa Wrecka is the same in melee and in ranged combat now, which is amazing, since he was a hybrid character before, but he did more damage against unarmored enemies in ranged combat and more damage against armored enemies in melee combat. Now it's even, and he works well against both in melee and in ranged. This will make more sense in a moment, when we get to the new skills, but now we need to quickly cover one more thing. Please remember that Snappa and Gulgortz getting reworks mean that they lose the DAKKA trait and instead get the get stuck in trait, which in theory makes the reworked Snappa Wrecka deal less damage in range 2 combat now. But it's properly fixed once you enable get stuck in. Now, for the Snappa Wrecka skills, we have so much fun to uncover. So, you see, the Snappa that we knew used to be a suicide bomber that resolved around taking damage and exploding. The suicide part is gone, but the damage part stays, and it's glorious. Please welcome Snappa's new passive, Power Trip. Basically, it makes all of Snappa's attacks ignore armor now, instead of happening only in melee. In addition to that, if Snappa is at full health, he will reduce the target's armor value, still not working against guild raid bosses, keep that in mind, and he will score one more hit, which will result in him doing 4+2 hits with get stuck in enabled. He will suffer 5% of his max health as damage though, so you will want him to heal up to enable those 6 hits in later turns. And now, the most fun part. I heard that you guys liked DAKKA. You know what's better than DAKKA? More DAKKA. And what if we can get this DAKKA to the next level? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Snappa's new active skill, DAKKA, DAKKA, DAKKA. How it works is you pick a target in ranged up to 3, it can be in melee too if needed, and you shoot them 6 times. That's simple, right? But it gets 2 more hits for every time Snappa Wrecka was healed in this fight, capping at 16 hits total. That's crazy in terms of hit numbers. Elgion users will like that combo for sure. What's even better is that this active ability also works for get stuck in, which can result in 24 hits total if enabled. 24 hits that can get buffed by Elgion, Dark Strider and other ranged damage buffs. That is absolutely lots of DAKKA done to the enemy. And if that enemy dies before all of the hits connect, the rest of the hits will shoot random enemies in range 3, meaning that you can basically clear a whole wave of enemies with this one active use. And that's basically the new Snappa Wrecka for you. Simple number changes to his stats, making him universally good in melee and ranged combat. And the goal to pursue during your fights, to load up on as much DAKKA as you can, to unleash tons of DAKKA towards your enemies. So, who does this new Snappa work best with? Well, Aleph Null is my number 1 contender for Snappa Wrecka synergies now, since he can repair him without using his main action. Just place Aleph Null next to our lovely Kilakan and he'll be back to full health, enabling his passive. Also, the Scarab Swarms will work great for enabling get stuck in guild raids, so that's a bonus. Elgion will also do wonders with Snappa's active, and his Doom ability works well with the previously mentioned Scarab Swarms, so there is potential for a huge damage output with this combo. And additionally, any other ranged damage buffs, for example Dark Strider from the Tau Empire, will also help with unleashing the DAKKA nuke on the last turn of the fight. So keep an eye out for ranged damage buffers in the future. I have to say, I've been using Snappa Wrecka since the game's release, and this new version of him makes me want to push him from Diamond 2 to Diamond 3. While not top tier or meta for sure, this guy will be fun to play and the DAKKA will make me happy as hell. Now, the minor thing that we skipped before is his suicide potential. Yes, Snappa Wrecka can still kill himself while using the active ability, but that would require him to be at 15% health or less. He doesn't get bonus damage on the explosion now, but it should be still a nice bonus if you manage to time his death correctly. And now, for the game designer Q&A part of the video, once again, I asked some questions and got some answers, so here we go. Question number 1. Is there any heavier synergy with the reworked Giba Scraps planned for Snappa? The answer is, it is too early to share anything here, but Giba Scraps will keep the mechanic trait as core of his identity. Question number 2. Any reason to drop the dual class aspect of Snappa more damage in range, armor reduction in melee? The answer is, we wanted to strengthen his profile as a useful all-rounder, making both range and melee equally viable. Question number 3. Were there other designs considered for his passive or active? Care to share some that got dropped? The answer is, we were considering to build him around the current 10th edition tabletop try that button or press it fasta dread mob detachment rule. Self-buffing but self-damaging him the more often you press the active ability button. But while fun and flavorful, all the button pressing did not play smoothly, did not get good feedback, and strayed away from the Tacticus core concepts. So it was not a good fit, especially to newer players or users that do not know the Warhammer 40k setting very well. Question number 4. Why remove bonus damage from Snappa's active if he kills himself? Since he can still kill himself with the ability, why not leave a smart part of his old active in-game for the occasion where he could provide extra damage by the death? The answer is, we did want to get away from actively encouraging him to suicide, since he is an early game campaign character and losing him in a battle means losing out on campaign reward medals. The new ability also has several moving parts already, and adding extra damage to Explode's trait would have added more complexity while going against the design goals. Oh, also one thing that I forgot to mention in the video, Giba Scraps also gets Get Stuck In as a bonus. We can consider it a band-aid fix for the character, it should make Octarius easier to complete too. So, that's it for this round of RewORKs. I have to say, I'm very pleasantly surprised by the unforeseen addition of Snappa's rework, and I have good faith that the new orcs will find a place in some game mode, whether it will be guild raids, guild wars, tournament arena, or legendary release events. It feels good to have good orc characters in game right now, after 2 years of them being on the weaker side of the roster. And I can't wait for Giba Scraps to get his rework in the future. If you enjoyed this video and got to the end, I salute you. Please remember about our Gulgortz giveaway. Leaving a subscription on my channel and a like and a comment on this video will make you able to win in the contest. Also, please do not forget to use my Deepest Dive creator code in-game for those sweet prizes. And if you appreciate my work, consider using my friend referral code. It helps me a lot in the long run, and I appreciate every single one of you that used it. That's it for the video, Yumis. Thanks again, see you in the next one, and now let us all remember that there is never enough DAKKA, and that the machine is eternal, of course.